On today's episode of the Ango Show, we're going to be talking about an AEW star who has requested their release from the company. In addition to that, we're going to talk about how AEW has responded to that release request, whether I think it's a good idea or a bad idea. We're also going to talk about an AEW announcement. They're doing something for the first time that I think is actually relatively cool. And we're going to talk about the WWE TNA NXT partnership. Who is not going to be crossing the line over onto NXT? Yeah, we're going to talk about it right here, right now on the Ango Show. All right, guys. So I want to kick things off with the AEW announcement. For the first time ever, AEW will be hosting a pay-per-view in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it looks like it will be AEW Dynasty. This was confirmed by Tony Khan when speaking to the Inquirer. He says Philadelphia has been a great home for AEW and really all of pro wrestling for many years. The energy is tremendous, and we've always wanted to have a pay-per-view event there. AEW Dynasty is going to be a great pay-per-view in a great city at an arena where we have a great history of putting on an awesome event. It's the perfect place to make a pay-per-view debut. And that's right, it does confirm AEW April. We will see AEW Dynasty in Philadelphia. And this is obviously huge for AEW. Listen, there's not that many times where a company in 2025 can do something for the first time. Going into a pay-per-view in a city that definitely loves pro wrestling will be truly beneficial for AEW. I like to consider this with a comparison to Detroit, for example. For a long time, AEW fans in Detroit wanted an AEW event in Detroit, and then we finally got it. And when we got it, the reception to it was very good. The ticket sales were incredible. The response from the crowd was really good. People were obviously excited. They've waited a very, very long time for an event to come to Detroit. AEW eventually gave us an event in Detroit. Now, obviously, AEW has been in Philly, but not for a pay-per-view. And I think when you want a pay-per-view for the first time, you want to do it in a market where you know the crowd will be rowdy. So Philly is definitely a good choice. I look forward to seeing what they do for AEW Dynasty. You know, obviously AEW is struggling to sell tickets right now. They're not as hot as they were, but Philly is a very hot market. I do expect AEW to do pretty damn well selling tickets for this event. I can't imagine Philly not showing up, but I want to see what kind of card are they going to bring to the table, and you know what kind of stories they will bring to the table. How will they make this a big time event? You know, this will be taking place, I want to say April 6th. So obviously we have quite a bit of time, but it's really important that AEW sets it up correctly to build that excitement perfectly. That brings us to Tessa Blanchard. Okay, so some very interesting stuff. Obviously, we're talking about WWE, TNA, the partnership. WrestleVotes was talking about the possibility of Tessa Blanchard appearing in WWE NXT. Now, at this time, it's not completely off the table. However, it doesn't seem like this will be happening anytime soon. Wow. Let me just say, this Tessa Blanchard stuff is very interesting because we already saw the response to Hulk Hogan. Now you got to wonder, how would the WWE universe respond to Tessa? WrestleVote says, I think the longer the partnership goes, the better shot of that happening, but I don't foresee it anytime soon. I think there's conversations that probably need to take place with a whole bunch of different parties before they would approach that. But I do think if it's still a partnership in 2 to 3 years and she's still part of the company, TNA wise, I'd probably say yeah. So obviously not soon, which makes a lot of sense, right? I don't think soon. What's an interesting common denominator with all of this Tessa Blanchard stuff is that there's still a lot of people who feel like they are owed apologies with the whole situation. A lot of people have called her a bully. A lot of people have not really been too fond of the reports and the stuff that was said about Tessa. And obviously a lot of talent have an issue with that. Now, at the end of the day, when I see Tessa Blanchard as a talent, I do think she's incredibly talented. When I look at some of the backstage talk about Tessa, and I'm not going to put out any sort of negative opinions on a person I have not met, I have not dealt with, or anything like that. But when I see these reports about Tessa, yeah, I think a lot of people really just want to see that she is sorry for the things that she had said or had done. You know, maybe WWE will have her on TV at one point. But I do agree with Wrestle Votes. It does make a lot of sense for her to have those conversations that are important, because you don't want no backstage animosity, and you want people to understand, like, listen, people make mistakes, people have mistakes, they've made mistakes before, but it's really important that people who make mistakes are genuinely sorry for their mistakes. And so for those people who are genuinely hoping and waiting to get that apology from her, hopefully they do. And maybe this could be Tessa, coming back into TNA now. Maybe this could be a situation where Tessa gets to the point where maybe she kind of rehabilitates her image a little bit. Well, obviously you see what happens, but the response to Tessa in TNA will be very telling as to whether or not WWE will have her on their programming. Now, a workaround to all of this is whether or not WWE would have an NXT talent go on to TNA television to feud with Tessa, which could be very interesting, because that way WWE doesn't have to put her on NXT. We'll see. And that brings us to Ricky Starks. So this is an interesting development in the story and the drama, because it appears that Ricky Starks did, in fact, request a release amid his fallout with AEW. According to Ibu of Wrestle Purist, he says that Starks has requested his release from AEW, but it was denied by Tony Khan. And now basically he is just working independent dates to keep his name in the spotlight until it is time for him to be done with his contract. Ibu also says there's a lot of things that most of it will never be reported, but ultimately there was a falling out, and it is what it is. He asked for a release, and Tony will not give it to him, so he's just going to wait out the rest of his deal. Wow. So we've never heard of Ricky actually asking for his release. We've heard of Ricky, having some issues backstage. We've heard of some issues with AEW not booking Ricky Starks. We've heard of all of these things, but we haven't heard of the release request. It's tough. It's incredibly tough. William Regal getting his release request granted by Tony Khan was probably the last time that we'll see AEW actually do that. Tony Khan obviously felt burned by the William Regal situation. I think Tony Khan is very smart to know that people in AEW are going to want to leave AEW for WWE, and he's obviously going to say no. This is a perfect example of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I think that's obviously pretty clear. Listen, Ricky's a star. The AEW sickos are going to turn on him. They do this with every person that's unhappy in that company. But that doesn't change the fact that Ricky's a star. He's doing some really cool stuff in House of Glory right now. Let him go into the indies. Let him run the indies, I guess. And, if I were Tony Khan, I would utilize him on TV until his contract's done, so that way you get your money's worth. At this point, who knows what will happen? But ladies and gentlemen, that's the Ango Show.